Hey everyone, Nabil here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Oculus Rift virtual reality headset. I've been an avid PC gamer for many years, and ever since VR popped up on my radar, I've been meaning to get one, but it's always been a bit expensive. Like it was like $600 to $800 just last year for either the Rift or the Vive, but thankfully, I was able to pick up a Rift during the Summer of Rift sale when the price of the Rift went down to about $399. Now, there's been a permanent price cut where you can pick up the Rift for about 400 bucks, which is making it pretty affordable for people like you and me. So let's get started. The Oculus Rift, as I mentioned, is a virtual reality headset or a head-mounted display. It allows you to, explore virtual worlds. Like you could feel like you're under the ocean, in space, in a spooky castle or something. What the Rift does is it relies on a PC to do the actual game rendering. Then stereoscopic images are sent from the PC to your Rift via HDMI cable. Now, what happens is each of your eyes sees a separate image, and this creates a sensation of depth for the characters and the background elements. So instead of like playing games on a monitor where everything is flat, you feel like you're actually walking around the game environment, adding a layer of immersion. This is known as this is called presence. The feeling of actually being somewhere, being able to interact with the environment. Now, the Rift is mainly used for gaming, but at the same time, it's got a lot of other applications as well. You can watch videos, you can see 360 videos, movies, VR experiences, and at the same time, things like telepresence. People on different parts of the country or the world can actually come together in a room and work on different projects. At the same time, you can use it for like 3D modeling, painting, and so forth. So there are a lot of applications for the Rift. Now, the what I bought was known as the Oculus Rift Touch Bundle. It came with a bunch of stuff. So what happens is there was the headset itself, there was two touch controllers, and there was two external sensor cameras. So I'm gonna just go over each of these things one by one. First of all, you can see the headset over here, the headset itself. It's got a very nice black matte sort of finish. Then on the top and on the sides, you see that it fits onto your head via these Velcro straps. These are adjustable and you can pretty much accommodate any sized head into them. And they very nicely distribute the weight of the headset onto your head, so it doesn't really feel top heavy or anything like that. Then moving on, the headset actually comes with built-in headphones, and these give you sort of a stereo surround sound, and when you're in the game world you feel like you can tell whether it's a whisper in your ear or the sound is coming from far away. So yeah, you can pick up sounds in the game itself. Now if we move on the inside, we can see that there is this black outline over here is known as the facial interface. It's made of like a sort of rubbery material which is a bit sweat absorbent, but if you play for a long enough session it can get a bit sweaty. Then on the inside, we can see these Fresnel lenses. Now, talking about the lenses, we should kind of clear a bunch of stuff. Like, if you've been following VR at all, you know that the current generation of headsets have a few issues, like that they're not high resolution enough, that there is some sort of screen door effect where you can kind of see the individual pixels. I would say there is a bit of a screen door effect, but if you really look for it, it's there. But if you're focused on the game itself, it's hardly a matter. Next, there's also an effect called what is it called? God rays, right? Now, God rays is basically when you have a white text or white whatever on top of a black background in the game. The lenses actually distort the white light and it sort of bleeds out. But yeah, I mean, you'll only see white text during the beginning or end credits of the game. So for roughly 99% of your gaming time, you won't be bothered by it. And what else? Like there's a narrow field of view, and it's 210 degrees only, meaning that like how in real life you have peripheral vision, you can see through the sides of your eyes. So that is a bit constricted in the headset. But overall, in terms of picture sharpness and while playing games, it's really great. Like maximum you will experience some trouble reading text, but I will say that overall, I mean, this is as good as it gets at the moment for first generation headsets. What else? Next, let's move on to the touch controllers. So the touch controllers have a pretty nice button layout. Basically, you have these analog sticks, two face buttons, a grip button, and a trigger. I will say that the touch controllers are very ergonomic. Basically, if you've played with an Xbox controller or something, you'll feel right at home. And in fact, people who are non-gamers even, you just get these into their hands, they'll pick it up very quickly. And with the touch controllers, basically you have hand presence in the game, meaning you can pick up things, shoot things. It's really great. And at the same time, the touch controllers have capacitive sensors, and what that means is if you put your finger on the buttons instead of even pressing them, the controllers know whether the fingers are on it or not. And then when you lift your fingers, you can do motions such as thumbs up or finger pointing. So yeah, you get like finger level presence in the game. So regarding the tracking of the Rift, what happens is the touch controllers and the headset itself, they have a bunch of embedded infrared dots, and these external sensor cameras right here, you get two with the Rift. So these are able to pick up the infrared dots and track your relative position in space. And the Rift and the Vive, they actually use 6 degrees of freedom tracking, which means that not only can you look around or rotate the stuff, at the same time you have positional tracking, meaning that it can you have translational movement basically. So yeah, it's pretty great. Now, with regards to setup, it's not extremely hard, but it's not plug and play either. Like it's not like a PS4 that you plug it into a TV and you're good to go. So the very first thing you have to do when you get the Rift is you have to download a setup from Oculus.com. It's about 1.7 gigabytes, which is not very huge in today's world, but the problem is it doesn't have an offline installer. So every time you want to set up the Rift in a new computer or something, you have to re-download it, which is a bit annoying. So as you're going through the setup process, you'll be asked to make a new Oculus account. You can also link your Facebook account. Then what you have to do is you have to set up your sensors in the room. What I did was I placed the sensors high above in a position so that they were looking down at me, and I placed them in opposing corners of the room. And what that did was it gave me 360-degree coverage. I mean, it's recommended that you buy an additional sensor, but you can get away with 2, like I do. Right, now, in terms of the sensors, a problem that I faced was, I have cats, right? And you might have kids or whatever. What happens is, my sensors got knocked down 3 or 4 times, and they have these, the front of them have these glass things, and I was so worried they would get cracked. Thankfully, they're fine still. Now, to combat that, I would recommend that instead of putting the sensors on top of a cabinet or something, you buy a bunch of security wall mounts and screw them to the wall, and that will give you a real security and peace of mind, that can be bought. So I bought these security mounts at just a local camera shop for about 250 taka. I think that's a worthwhile purchase. Right, so as you're going through the setup, what happens is the Rift setup will ask you to start plugging in the devices one by one. If you look at the headset first of all comes with one USB cable for power and one HDMI cable to transfer the images, actually, the video. Then the sensor cameras themselves, actually, each of them require one USB port as well. So you're looking at one HDMI and like 3 USB ports. So you better make sure that your PC is able to do it, or it has enough USB ports. Okay, now another thing is, as you're using the Rift, before all that, at the last leg of the setup, you actually have to make a boundary around your room. You take the headset and the touch controllers, and while pressing the triggers, you trace a boundary around your play area. What happens is this allows you to, this prevents you from like smacking into your physical wall when you're in the game. As I was saying a little while ago, while you're playing the video games, the headset is a bit enclosed and it generates a lot of heat from its display. So, you might get sweaty and you might feel a bit, Now, another problem that some gamers may face is that of motion sickness. What happens is you are in the game and you appear to be moving, whilst in the real world, you're physically standing still. And this disconnect might throw some people off. And yeah, so that is also a problem to keep in mind. But in my experience, both forms of discomfort, like the heat and at the same the heat, the sweating, and also the motion sickness, they tend to subside over time as you become more acclimatized to VR. I never had a motion sickness problem, and even the heat thing, I'm much more used to it now. I'm a sweaty person in general. I think you can already see me sweat, even though I'm like underneath the ceiling fan. But yeah, even I stopped sweating while playing the game after a while. It's just a matter of getting used to it, I suppose. Now, to help you combat these issues in the meantime, the Rift has a number of comfort and safety options. As I mentioned, there's the boundary chaperone sort of wall to prevent you from hurting yourself or messing up your electronics. Then at the same time, in the game, you have the option for teleport-based movement, so that instead of like in a normal FPS or whatever game, you would move with the analog sticks, right? But instead of doing that, you sort of teleport from one place to the other. You blink, and this effect is less jarring for you. At the same time, there's snap turning, that instead of turning smoothly at a time, you kind of snap a little bit 30 degrees or so at a time. And yeah, again, this helps to combat motion sickness. Okay, a very important thing is, like, you're buying the headset, you're spending the money, but what can you do with it actually? Thankfully, prospective Rift owners, they have a huge library of content to look forward to. At the very outset, your the Rift bundle actually comes with a bunch of games, like six in fact. You get Robo Recall, Dead and Buried, Toy Box, Medium, I'm losing fingers, Quill, and Lucky's Tale. At the same time, once you play through these games and you enjoy them and stuff, you can log on to Oculus.com or Steam and enjoy a bunch of games that were pretty big budget games that were made specifically for VR. Things like Wilson's Heart, Arizona Sunshine, Eve Valkyrie, Raw Data. Really great games. Then there are a bunch of 2D games which have received official VR support. Things like Dirt Rally, Project Cars, Elite Dangerous, Subnautica, right? One thing that really interested me and got me hooked as I kept exploring it one by one, I'm on Oculus Reddit all the time, like at work, every single day. I shouldn't probably be mentioning it. Anyways, so what happens is, a lot of the FPS games that we grew up with, things like Quake 2, Doom 3, even Alien Isolation is a recent one. So a lot of these games, and Half-Life 2 is coming out. Anyway, let me get back to it. So a lot of these games, they've been converted to VR, and I don't just mean like head tracking, but with full motion controllers and lots of VR options. These were converted by fans, by the community, and they're so well done. So even if you don't buy games, there's so many free games that have been converted or are being converted at the moment. You'll always have something to play. That being said, you might be asking me that these games that you're mentioning, where are the Witchers and the Battlefields and the Call of Duties and stuff? Yes, VR doesn't have the AAA heavy hitters yet, but at the same time, you have to understand that there's a very low or a very small install user base for VR still. It's getting there. People are adopting it one by one, but at the same time, VR game production is a risky proposition. So it might be a couple of years until we say a new Assassin's Creed game for VR or something. But at the same time, we are seeing some developers, some industry giants starting to embrace VR. Like towards the end of this year, we're gonna have Bethesda and Capcom and Rockstar. They're gonna start porting a lot of their really big budget franchises, like Fallout 3, Fallout 4 is coming out, Skyrim is coming out, Resident Evil 7 is getting a PC VR release, LA Noire. So the future is pretty rosy, I would say. Now, buying the Rift kind of made me broke because it was a really spur of the moment sort of decision. I didn't get a chance to buy a lot of games, but I've been enjoying a couple that. A couple of free ones and all. Okay. First of all, I would like to recommend First Contact and Dream Deck. These are the two VR apps that come. These are the first two VR apps that you basically try once you've installed the Rift. Now, the First Contact is basically you encounter this really shy sort of robot, and you have to kind of coax him into a friendship with yourself. You activate him, and then he kind of flies away. But then, you sort of wave at him and kind of prove to him that you're not a threat. And then eventually he starts handing you game discs, and you put them into this really 80s sort of computer console. And then suddenly you have all these mini games, like you're shooting, little butterfly things are coming and landing on your finger, a black hole, for example. Really cool stuff. Then Dream Deck is a kind of non-interactive VR, a collection of non-interactive VR experiences. One after the other, you sort of go through them. My two favorite ones from Dream Deck are, in one you are kind of standing several hundred feet up on a skyscraper and you're looking down and you can see traffic below you. It's very jarring because the graphics are so nice. It sort of feels like you're standing atop a huge building, similar to how Batman would stand on a gargoyle, for example. Then another one is you're inside this National History Museum, and this giant T-Rex sort of lumbers towards you, and like when it's about 3 feet away from you, it full on roars and spit particles start flying into your face. It's really great and scary and great. Then another game that I really enjoyed was Robo Recall. It's basically like you are Will Smith in iRobot. These robots and synthetics have gone nuts, and you sort of have to use an arsenal of weapons to take them down. You can even grab them, rip them apart. This is sort of like a wave shooter with a very high score centric mechanic. Yeah, it's pretty great. Then another app, which is basically a demo, not even a full-fledged game, is Aircar. In Aircar, you are piloting this sort of flying vehicle through a futuristic city, and it feels very Blade Runner-esque with huge sort of towering skyscrapers, and you can see the entire inside of your craft. The buttons are sticking out. There's a control panel with some holographic displays and everything. When you turn around, you can see the engines of the aircraft all around you, and rain droplets are falling on the windshield. They're sort of sliding down. A really cool sort of cyberpunk soundtrack is playing in the background. It's great. It's great. One of the paid apps I actually got to try was called Arizona Sunshine. Arizona Sunshine is basically you are in a zombie apocalypse, and you're very low on ammo. You're alone. You're surrounded by zombies, and your character is going a bit nuts because of the isolation. Now, the great thing about Arizona Sunshine is that you have to be very precise with your shots. On the harder difficulties, there's no aiming reticle, no laser dot sight, nothing. You just pretty much rely on the iron sights of the gun. You have to line up your gun and get headshots, and get headshots at a distance, because if you let the zombies close the gap, they'll maul you instantly. Now, this game is a bit light on story. You don't really encounter any other human characters. So I wish there was a bit more narrative depth, but at the same time, I feel it's a pretty great game that similar to something like State of Decay, where a lot of the great puzzle pieces were there. It just needs a bit more polished in the sequel. So let's see. I mean, Arizona Sunshine Part 2 might be amazing. So, if I've been able to convince you a bit, whether the Rift is a good investment or not, now let's get to how you can actually acquire the Rift. Just a couple of months back, you could acquire the Oculus Touch bundle. Now I think it's called the Oculus Rift Touch system. It's available for $399. You can get it from Oculus or Amazon. Unfortunately, users in Bangladesh might face a bit of an issue, because if you import it through somebody, they'll charge you a fairly high dollar rate, or they will, very high shipping fees, right? So instead, I would recommend, if you have a chance to go abroad to the States or wherever, buy the thing at a physical store, Target, Best Buy, or if you can't do it, allow an acquaintance or a friend or a relative to get it for you. I mean, you can get it for flat $400 instead of paying really high shipping fees and everything. Now, before getting the Rift, you have to kind of make sure that your PC is up to snuff. You need a fairly good, reasonably good PC. If we go to Oculus.com and we scroll down for a bit, we can see that there's these recommended specs and minimum specs. Sure, you can check out the minimum specs and you can use the Rift using the minimum specs, but I would highly recommend going for the recommended specs instead. Like, for example, they say that you need a GTX 1060 graphics card or an AMD equivalent, which is an RX 480. For a CPU, you need an Intel i5 4590 or an AMD Ryzen 1500X, at least 8 gigabytes of RAM, an operating system which is Windows 7 64-bit or newer, and as I mentioned before, one HDMI port with 3 USB 2.0 ports. They recommend 3.0 ports actually, but the thing is, I'm getting by with 2.0 ports, no problem. With these settings, you should have a pretty good VR experience, only having to turn down certain settings in certain cases. So yeah, VR is really resource intensive. If you read some articles, you can see that it requires at least three times the rendering power of a 1080p 60 FPS game. So yeah, I mean, the power requirements are to be expected. Now, my RX 480 was able to do a good enough job with the games, but I faced certain compatibility issues because of my really old i7 combination. It's second generation actually. In order to combat that, I actually bought a PCI Express to USB 3.0 card. You slot it into your PCI Express, and then instantly you get USB 3.0 ports. So that helped me. And I bought it for only like 2000 taka locally, and you can buy it off Amazon. And Inatech is what Oculus recommends. You can check it out. Then, since I have one of my sensors in the other side of the room, what I do is I use a USB cable extender. But the problem is a locally bought one that I used, this guy actually, it does a really crappy job. My sensor in the middle of the game will sort of flicker on and off, and that's very annoying. To have a bit more stability, go for a much better USB cable extender, something like from Monoprice. I actually have one ordered that's going to come at the end of the month, so that'll give me a bit more stability, I think. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the hardware, make sure your computer is reasonably good with a 1060 or an RX 480 at least, an i5 and so forth. Then some additional hardware requirements you might consider are the PCI Express card, PCI USB Express card. Then you might get a good cable, and you might also consider the security wall mounts that I mentioned a while back. So yeah. Now, final thoughts. Should you get the Rift or not? Well, we encountered some pros and cons till now. The price is pretty affordable now. I mean, the Rift is basically the most feature packed and the most, cheapest at the same time compared to things like the Vive, compared to the Windows mixed reality headsets. So the price is pretty affordable. But at the same time, you need a pretty decent gaming rig to get started, right? The setup process is a bit annoying, and at the same time, prolonged usage might put some people off. It might be uncomfortable for some people. A lot of good games are out there on the Oculus Store, on Steam VR and all, but the killer VR app is not yet out. A good example would be, say, Halo for the first Xbox. Like, you have to play Halo, and you need an Xbox to get. So the killer VR app is not out yet, but things are coming on the way. There's as I mentioned, there's a bunch of existing technical limitations: the low resolution, the screen door effect, the narrow field of view, the limited mobility due to being tethered, right? So yeah, I mean, instead, should you wait for the second generation of all-in-one headsets that don't even need a PC? Well, in my humble opinion, I think you should go for the Rift. I mean, it's a resounding yes for me. Because look, it's able to generate a level of immersion that is really hard for me to describe in words, or for anyone for that matter. You actually have to try the thing for yourself. Then it's like you're not just playing a video game, you're inside the video game. You're basically, you can be anything. You can be a fighter pilot in space, you can be the Doom guy, blasting demons back to hell. You can travel underwater in a diving suit, while you're encountering hallucinations and everything. There is no shortage of experiences available. I think VR for this at this time, it's here to stay, because just look at the vast existing library of content, all the AAA games that are coming down the pipe, the constant hardware and software optimizations, designed to improve user experience over time. So this is a bleeding edge technology, and if you are willing to give up forego certain limitations or look past certain limitations, then there's definitely enough here to justify your purchase. So for me, at least, I think the Rift was a very worthwhile purchase, and every friend that I've a lot of friends of mine, they're like, they don't buy it right now. It's a very unproven technology. Wait a couple of years. Why do you have to be an early adopter and so forth? So I got them to try the Rift, and they didn't become believers as such, but then they were less critical of me that, it is a waste of money probably, but not as much of a waste of money as I previously thought. This is actually pretty cool. I might give this a shot. Let me play it a couple of times when I come over. So that's it for me, pretty much. I hope you get a Rift. A lot of good games are coming down the line, and happy rifting. Till next time.